Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar. We're going to be talking today about ISO 50001. We've got a guest speaker with us to talk about an energy program to help you with ISO 50001. So let's get started. Okay, first of all, I would like to introduce my co-presenter today, Trina Kennedy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Trina Kennedy. I'm a Senior Program Officer with Natural Resources Canada in the Buildings Division. I've been with federal government for 19 years and with this division since 2017. And thank you for inviting me today. I look forward to this presentation.
Thank you, Trina. Okay, so Trina will be joining us in the second half of the presentation before we get to her part. I'll be taking you through some of the history of Bureau Veritas, some of what we do with regards to ISO 50001, why we feel it's so important. I guess I should say my name, David Vigil. I am the Senior Director here at Bureau Veritas. I've been with BV 15 years almost, and I do specialize in some of our sustainability and assurance programs. I actually had the pleasure of being part of the ISO TC 242 that helped develop ISO 50001 standard back in 2011. So it is a program that I do hold close to my experience. Okay, so let's talk about Bureau Veritas. Those that are not familiar with Bureau Veritas may not know, but Bureau Veritas is actually almost a 200-year-old company. Originally in 1828, founded in Belgium, and it was a big maritime company, so in the marine industry, and still is today. Still practice the same original business that we did back in 1828 with marine and ship classification. Of course, a lot of technology, more advanced today. But BV has kind of leveraged that reputation of classification and being a trusted brand for the last 200 years to be there besides industry as it has progressed, everything from the Industrial Revolution, safety, and making sure that anything that we use as a society is tested, inspected, and verified for whatever need comes up. So excited to share that about Bureau Veritas. But you can see 200 years, we've come a long way. This slide kind of gives you an overview of who Bureau Veritas is today. Originally with the maritime industry, you can see today we're in 6 different business units: marine and offshore, consumer products, and our division where I work is certification, which is generally management system certification. So um, So from that history and where we are today, you can see that we've kind of taken an approach to position ourselves for the next period to say how can we benefit from our reputation and what we've done in the past. So we kind of looked at what is out there in the market, and we thought sustainability, environmental stewardship. These are the hot topics that really our clients are pushing us to be involved with. Um, and we launched this Green Line services, so that kind of falls in line with what we're talking about today, ISO 50001. And so we want to be one of the leaders when it comes to CSR. For those of you not familiar, CSR with the CSR term, it's corporate social responsibility. And I think this is a really broad term. People talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, green services, and it gets really complicated, right? Because it can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we're going to walk you through what that means to Bureau Veritas. So here you can kind of see how we look at corporate social responsibility, or some people call it ESG, environment, social, and governance. So it is broken down here as how we look at it in the different sectors, everything from energy, carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, responsible sourcing. We work a lot with supply chains to make sure that the minerals that we source or the materials that we source come from responsibly managed sources. So labor issues and making sure that working environment is safe and adequate for the employees. All the way back, like I said, today we're going to be talking about ISO 50001, which falls under one of the main pillars of our environmental ESG portfolio, and that's energy, right? And energy is probably one of the most important aspects of the ESG portfolio that we work with. And showing this slide so you can see how our ESG portfolio sort of matches up with the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. So probably if you're on this call, you're familiar with this, but if you're not, the United Nations sort of identified Sustainable Development Goals that companies should strive for. And they're all centered around, being responsible stewards of the environment and resources, and also human rights. So you may notice on companies' sustainability reports and reporting that they're targeting certain one of these pillars from the United Nations. And so what's nice about this for Bureau Veritas is that it really aligns with our services. So whether you're talking about animal welfare, ethics, energy, sustainability, normally you're going to find a service really aligned exactly with those sustainable development goals. And of course, energy is one of the SDGs that a lot of companies are pushing for or striving for to demonstrate that they are responsible stewards. So ISO 50001 can be part of this. And so maybe now when you see these SDGs reported by a company or a corporation, you'll recognize that there's some work in the background and could be even with Bureau Veritas to validate the performance along these SDGs. Okay. And so why is energy management so important? Mentioned earlier that it's one of the most important pillars of our CSR portfolio. And that's true. And people are really pushing for this because, energy is one of the main things that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. A lot of people are targeting greenhouse gas emissions and saying, hey, we need to be carbon neutral. And a good way to get your arms around that is generally to talk about energy and energy usage, energy sources. So when people and corporations talk about carbon neutrality and net zero, a lot of times one of the first places they'll look is on their energy uses and how efficient they are with that, as well as the sources from where the energy comes from. And so here you can see a little bit more about energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. So, like I said, globally, energy consumption is the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so, while I don't think we're going to get away from using energy and being a commercial society, it's important to identify that there are ways to be more efficient with our energy and how we use it and where we source it from. So that's why greenhouse gas emissions and energy are so closely linked. And companies are starting to set their energy targets so they can use that as a way to manage their greenhouse gas emissions. And so here you can see that the race to net zero and companies that are making pledges. So we are working with the CDP in Europe and have some information about the different types of industries. And it really used to be a small group of industries that were working to net zero or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And you can see now the sectors are as varied as you can imagine. Every type of corporation or every industry and sector is setting targets and trying to realize reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So you can see there the number of companies in the different sectors, and they're all making, in these sectors, making pledges to reduce emissions, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. But every single one of these companies is making a different pledge to reduce emissions. Um, and I think this is important to note here. We have the differentiation of listed companies. So that's publicly traded companies and private companies. So sometimes we think, okay, well, these companies are doing this, maybe for media or marketing edge. But when you look at it in these terms, that some of these are not publicly traded companies, and sure, there's still brand impact to this, but they have no stakeholders that are demanding it, or I should say shareholders that are demanding it. But yet you can see there's still a lot of companies that are not publicly traded that are becoming part of this pledge to reduce GHG emissions. And where we're pulling a lot of this data from, mentioned it before, is CDP, so the Carbon Disclosure Project. And those that have been in the industry for some time probably um, are not surprised by the numbers in the early 2000s, where companies pledged to disclose their emissions and how they're performing against it. And you can see that it has grown, a lot over the last years. But the important thing to note here is that not everyone is an A company, right? And so I think that's an important thing to remember, is that companies were a little bit hesitant to disclose on emissions and carbon because they weren't sure, how it would look if their emissions were not at an A level, or their performance was not at an A level. But now the trend is more to be transparent, to say, hey, this is our baseline, this is where we're headed. And so participation in the Carbon Disclosure Project has grown because stakeholders are demanding this kind of transparency. And here on the slide, you can see the names of some of the companies that have made their commitments with CDP to reduce emissions and carbon footprint. And you can see these are some of the biggest names in uh, out there. But also you can see that there are various different industries. So you've got travel, retail, manufacturing. So it's no longer limited to certain brands or certain sectors, but you're seeing companies from all different walks to be able to participate and make those commitments. And of course, there's so many more, because as you can see on that chart, there are thousands. And so this is just a small snapshot of some of the companies working to reduce their carbon footprint. And here, just to put it in perspective, how much the CO2 emissions are growing. This was data taken at the end of 2021. And so you can see it's increasing. We had that slight decrease in 2020, where emissions decreased, CO2 emissions, of course, air travel and different other things were down in 2020. But despite that, it's right back on track to continue to grow. Um, and that's with all these companies making these pledges to reduce CO2 emissions. Hopefully, this is something that changes over time. And like I said, ISO 50001 and energy is going to be a big part of this. Okay. And so this is a sort of recap here. So just to what we covered, a lot of companies are becoming part of making pledges to become carbon neutral and achieve net zero. Some companies are even saying, hey, we're going to decarbonize and be, we're going to be net negative. So that's happening. But one final thing to note here is that there's also legislation coming out. Not so much in North America here yet, but in the EU, directives that you have to set targets to reduce energy and become more energy efficient. So you can see that there's EU directives coming out, and hopefully that's going to be something that incentivizes companies to make those pledges and use tools like ISO 50001 to become more energy efficient. Okay, so we've definitely mentioned ISO 50001 quite a bit throughout the presentation here so far. So I did want to just frame it as far as what is ISO 50001. It's not a piece of software. It's not an electronic sensor. It is a management system. So a management system that we're all familiar with. These are the processes and procedures, work instructions. A lot of people think of it a different way, but it's really the blueprint of how we do what we do as an organization, really focused on energy management and energy efficiency. So making us think about, how do we use energy? Where does it come from? How can we improve on the performance? So it is based on the Deming model and works really in that way. But ISO 50001 is a little bit different from a lot of the other management system standards, into the fact that it does involved a bit of measurement and verification. So there's a piece of calculations and math involved, which differentiates itself from some of the traditional ISO standards, so they can add value in terms of really determining if you're performing in terms of your energy management and energy efficiency targets. And so you can see, obviously, a lot of benefits to ISO 50001. We've kind of talked about some already, but really some of the core ones, like we said, it helps with you to reduce your emissions, because obviously if you're using less energy, less emissions, it can help you comply with some legislation such as that EU directive that we mentioned earlier. And then cost savings, right? So, I mean, I think we all live in homes or whatnot. And, the less energy you use, you're going to save money. So that's an inherent benefit, and really something that, you know, can make a energy management system a no-brainer, because it kind of ends up paying for itself. And then, finally, reputation and risk management. So these kind of go hand in hand. Improving your reputation as an organization. Mention those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So obviously, there's a lot of buzz around UN SDGs, and so if you can provide or demonstrate some actual evidence that you are working towards achieving those with ISO 50001 or some other energy management, that'll enhance your reputation, and then it'll reduce the risk, right? Because if you have that reputation, it allows you to have that commitment from your stakeholders, and then based off of the cost savings, you can reinvest that into your organization. And I did mention at the top, so I was part of the TC 242 that wrote the 2011 version of ISO 50001. I was not fortunate enough to participate in the rewrite or the revision in 2018. But a lot of important updates were made to the 2018 version, and some of those are listed here. Not going to go into too much depth, but one of the main things is that it really aligns nicely now on the high level structure with the other ISO standards, which is a big benefit, right? I mean, I think you know certainly in my day to day, we deal with so many companies that already are audited for quality, environment, safety, and it's all ISO standards. And so there can be a bit of audit fatigue. And when it comes to that, I think aligning the high level structure is a big benefit, so that the audit fatigue is not as heavy. And so companies going and making the decision to commit to ISO 50001 can really leverage on some of the mandatory elements of the standard already being there in place, um, from having implemented other management systems. And then um, some of the other pieces on that is just the leadership commitment. I think we all know that without leadership commitment, that it really is hard to establish these goals and deliver on them. So I do think that as much as we can put the focus on leadership commitment and management system standards, and really anything we do will help drive the results that we want. Okay, and so how can Bureau Veritas help? Well, of course, we're the world's largest certification body, so we can definitely help for any company looking to get certified at the end of their implementation. We also have a variety of training, and then I think something that is unique to Bureau Veritas is a number of accreditations we have. Some of them are global, some are local. But depending on legislation or customer requirements, oftentimes different accreditations will be asked for. And so we can generally support with the different accreditations. And here, just wanted to show really quick for some of that might not be familiar with how the certification process works, really the timeline of how it goes. Generally, we do a pre-audit, which is not mandatory, but definitely recommended to help ease the pain of the certification audit. This will identify any major gaps that you're having uh, prior to the official audit, and to make sure that the audit goes more smoothly. Then from there we can move on, or if we skip that, we start with the stage one. Stage one is a traditional readiness review. We go through, make sure that you've got all the mandatory elements addressed, such as management review, such as internal audit, documented procedures, anything that would be required as far as process or procedure, and that it is in place and it exists. If that's successful, we move on to the stage two. The stage two is more of the traditional type of audit. We create audit trails and we interview people, and we really collect objective evidence, basically to prove that everything that we saw in stage one as far as a good process and procedure has actually been implemented and being used by the organization. And then finally, after that is completed, we issue the certificate, and the certificate is valid for 3 years, but maintained for validity via the surveillance audits that you see here. And so wanted to show some of the companies that we do work with already on ISO 50001. A lot of these are global um, companies, but we work with them on various different projects. But wanted to highlight that we do work with these companies on ISO 50001. So no matter what industry you're in, we'll generally have a subject matter expert that not only knows ISO 50001, but knows your industry, so they can be there to support a successful audit. And just pulling off of that client list, you can see here some of, just wanted to show a case study of some of the bigger projects that we worked on in terms of ISO 50001, such as Schneider Electric. Schneider Electric wanted to implement ISO 50001, and one of the challenges was that this was going to be global, with global KPIs and wanted to have a lot of consistency globally. So came to Bureau Veritas, and we were able to implement the solution to get that implemented, and help them leverage globally the consumption of energy, and make sure that they were all compliant, and they were all pushing for the same KPIs to reduce energy across the organization. And then a case study closer to home, one that I had the pleasure of working on with Bell Canada. So Bell Canada was a great project to work with. I can't say enough good things about that team. A lot of times when we think of ISO 50001, we think about manufacturing. We think about really industries with a lot of compressors or metal parts. But Bell Canada was an interesting project because obviously they're a telecommunications company. They operate very differently than a manufacturing company. but yet they still wanted to leverage ISO 50001 to improve their energy performance and be part of how they are working toward reducing their GHG emissions. And so worked on this project and were able to, through auditing, validate that the great system that was developed by the leaders at Bell Canada was actually being used effectively throughout the organization, and is really driving benefits to reduce energy usage and be more energy efficient. Okay, and so with that, at this point, I want to hand it back over to Trina so she can tell you about a program that she works with that can actually help you for your implementation towards ISO 50001.
Thank you, David. That was a fantastic presentation. Great information. In my presentation, I had originally planned to talk a little bit about ISO 50001, but you've covered it quite well. I work on the building side of the Buildings and Industry Division at the Office of Energy Efficiency at Natural Resources Canada. Again, my name is Trina Kennedy. I'm pleased to be here with you here today. Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to speak to you about the ISO funding program that we offer, but I'd also like to explain to you a little bit of a highlight of the whole program suite that we have for the building sector. ISO 50001 was originally created and was being worked on by our industry division, and since 2018 has now been offered by the buildings division. And I will explain to you a little bit why. So just a highlight of our agenda for today. So overview of the buildings program suite, including the 50001 funding, the funding program overview, the application process, the tools and resources that are available for Canadians, and also questions at the end. So the objective of the presentation today is to give a quick high-level overview of what the programs are on the buildings division side, and how we can offer stakeholders, Canadian stakeholders, programs, resources to assist them to understand ISO 50001, to apply it, to adopt it, and why it's important. Also, we'll talk about the next steps once the process has been explained to you for the funding program, what you need to do to partake if you wish. The Buildings and Industry Division offers a range of energy efficiency programs to assist owners, property managers, and energy managers in reaching the net zero emissions target, which is for us in Canada dated to 2050. The first program that we offer is, as we stated, the ISO 50001 Energy Management Standard. It's been quite well explained by David. I don't need to go through the details of that one. We'll talk a little bit more about the funding program next. The second program that we offer in Canada, which is very important and that relates to the ISO standard, is benchmarking, labeling, and disclosure. In 2018, Buildings Division of NRCan provided funding to jurisdictions across Canada to assist them to implement benchmarking tool. In this case, it was Energy Star Portfolio Manager, so that jurisdictions across Canada could understand the energy use and consumption of their buildings. And once that is understood, then policies could be adopted across Canada, where building owners and managers would need to disclose the energy use of the building. Since then, Ontario has since implemented that policy. They have, for buildings that are over 100,000 square feet meters, building need to report on an annual basis their energy use. The province of Quebec has since announced that in 2023, next year, their policies will also be into place, And the City of Montreal has recently started their policy for this fiscal year, which is 2022. We also have the program Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a free bilingual energy data benchmarking tool that helps clients understand the energy uses, consumption, and costs of the building energy uses. You can't change what you don't know, and if you don't understand the consumption of your building, then you won't understand why it's important to implement energy management systems such as ISO. So the first pillar for Natural Resources Canada and the Buildings Division was to offer the tools and the resources to assist to build that capacity. A fourth program that we have is actually the Energy Star Building Certification, where if your building is within the top 25% of energy consumption usage, then you can get your building certified. That an audit is needed for that certification to take place. And licensed professionals, such as engineers, are consultants that are needed in order to put this, to help the building certify in Canada. We also have the Energy Star for multi-family high-rise. Is a new construction program. You can go onto our website. That program is new. It is currently offered in Ontario, and we are looking to expand it to the province of BC within the next fiscal year or so. The sixth program that we have in place is the Energy Manager Program. We're at the tail end of that program, but that program was to help increase energy management capacity in certain provinces because there was a lack of resources available to provide assistance to understand energy use, GHG emissions, and do audits in certain provinces on buildings. So this program is now ending, I believe, at the end of March of this year. Coming soon to Canada, and I'm personally working on this program, is getting the 50001 Ready Navigator implemented for Canadian stakeholders. It is now just available in the US, and also the 50001 Ready Canada program, which will be a recognition program for all of those who have completed the 25 tasks in the 50,000 Ready Navigator tool that are associated with the ISO steps. Therefore, this is coming, we're hoping probably in the next few months. So together, all these programs, along with retrofits, deep retrofits, commissioning, recommissioning, and also the updated of the building codes, these are all programs that are offered or that are being worked on by Natural Resources Canada's Building and Industry Division, Office of Energy Efficiency. And the goal of these programs together, again, is to work towards the net zero emissions in Canada for all Canadian stakeholders. What are the benefits for your organization in the implementation of ISO 50001? Before we start, there is a point that I'd like to make. We've spoken so far a lot about the benefits for organizations and being bigger industries that are implementing ISO. And with the move from our industry division to bringing this program into the buildings division, the objective was for municipalities and jurisdiction to actually start implementing ISO 50001 in institutional buildings, such as arenas, bigger town, what would you say, courtrooms, anything that's institutional related for a city, a municipality, and even provincial governments as well. So we were trying to bring and introduce this program and make it ready for a bigger audience throughout Canada, because it is a great program and it is much needed, and it can apply to different stakeholders. So when I say what are the benefits for organizations, I also mean municipalities and jurisdictions. Very important. The benefits are to reduce a building's energy consumption, energy costs, and greenhouse gas emissions, as David stated, addressing in an organization's internal energy consumption behavior, which is one of the benefits of ISO, is that it's not just about actions such as audits with engineers. There's also needs to be a plan for how the behavior of the organization or the municipality and how to deal with these things, to develop internal policies, within your municipality or your organizations of how you're going to do this, which is a very important aspect of ISO 50001. It's not just about the technical, it's also about the behavior inside the organization. Establishing internal policies, as I just stated, continuous analysis of the building's equipment and energy efficiency. The rigor of the standard ensures that it will produce positive results and continuous improvement. Key, continuous improvement. It's not just about a year or 2 years, it's continuously building on getting better and better year after year. The ISO program components that we offer, that we specifically focused on Natural Resources Canada, was developing a funding program to help develop ISO 50001 resources throughout Canada, and also for the resources for it to become known to more stakeholders in Canada. The second component was really to provide the tools necessary in Canada for this, for the program to be known. And this is why we are focusing right now on the 50001 Ready Navigator. It's in the US, and we're getting Canadianized for the Canadian stakeholders. And also the 50001 Ready Canada Recognition Program for those who have implemented the 25 tasks. And of course, again, the tool and the recognition program is meant to reduce the barriers for ISO implementation. Why do we encourage it in Canada? Well, it helps Canadians to achieve the building energy efficiency targets and GHG reduction objectives. And it creates employment and skilled workforce. We need to have more resources in Canada that will understand and be able to implement this program. So the funding program overview. So to support the introduction of ISO 50001 in commercial and institutional building, NRCan is offering a cost-shared financial assistance to help organizations implement the ISO standard. Note that all of the information and the definitions that I will be referring to in this description can be found in our application guide. If you have not received the application guide as of yet, which is normal because it is now closed and the request for proposals is coming again in August and September of this year, of this fiscal year 2022. You will have access to the guides again, probably a few weeks before the request for proposal opens. And we also share the templates that are needed for you to submit an application for a project. We have two types of funding. We have funding for direct recipients, and we also have funding for initial recipients. And I will explain to you a little bit of what the difference is between the two. NRCan provides up to 60% for nonprofit organizations and 75% for profit organizations to a maximum of $40,000 per building, or for an entire project or an organization or municipalities that have more than 5 buildings in their project, we can go up to a maximum of $200,000 per fiscal year for the project implementation. It's important to note that no upfront financial amounts will be provided to the successful applicants. The funding program is based on the reimbursement of spent eligible costs only with receipts. NRCan funding is stackable with other funding sources for up to 75% for profit organizations and 100% for nonprofit organizations. As an example, If you have a utility provider or a provincial government that offers assistance, financial assistance for energy managers, you can join these two programs together and the funding is stackable. Also of importance for our funding programs, all buildings must be registered and actively benchmarking an Energy Star portfolio manager to be considered for the funding program. It is also available for high-rise, medium and high-rise residential buildings. Eligible expenses can include salaries of internal employees for work related to the project, professional, scientific, and technical fees specific to the project, fees for data collection, monitoring, tracking, analysis, and benchmarking services, fees associated with training on the energy management system, including employee awareness and upgrades to the competencies of employees internally, fees for ISO 50001 certification, and last but not least, purchase of instrumentation software and metering equipment for IMIS, according to the ISO 50001 energy standard. The purchase of the instrument is covered, but the implementation, the installation fees is not covered. Just needed to make that clear. Who can apply? As I stated before, the funding program is available for two types of applicants or recipients: direct recipients and initial recipients. Direct recipients are commercial and institutional building owners and operators, medium high-rise MURBs, municipal and provincial governments, and Indigenous communities and organizations that want to implement the ISO 50001 in their buildings. Initial recipients can be defined as municipal, provincial, territorial governments and agencies, utilities, industry associations, and registered nonprofit organizations that implement programs that redistribute funds to direct or ultimate recipients to undertake eligible project activities. Please note that this information can be found in our application guide. The types of eligible projects. We have 4 types of eligible projects for our funding: the feasibility study, a feasibility study with action commitment, an ISO 50001 compliance, ISO 50001 certification. What is the difference between the ISO certification versus the ISO compliance? This slide, we clearly show the difference between the two. Both are eligible projects for our funding program. That being said, recertification is not an eligible cost. The application process. Please note that the Buildings Funding Program will be open and receive proposals in late summer or early fall of 2022. We're looking at late August, September. No proposals will be evaluated or received before the funding program is officially launched on that date. The launch will be advertised on NRCan's website. We will also be providing that information to consultants such as Bureau Veritas weeks prior to the opening of the program. How to apply. To be eligible for financial assistance, an organization must follow the following process. They must email NRCan to request a project proposal template and application guide. Carefully read the application guide and all templates. Complete the application template and submit your proposal to NRCan through our email address that will be provided. Once your application has been reviewed and deemed complete, NRCan will send you a notification of receipt within 7 business days of the application receipt. NRCan will make every effort to send you a decision letter by the end of November or December of 2022. However, our service standards are 40 business days and could possibly change before that time period to 60 days. It is currently being reviewed. If your project has been successful, successfully selected, the decision letter will follow with a letter of conditional approval. Final selection decisions remain at the sole discretion of Natural Resources Canada. The process after approval. NRCan will send you a draft contribution agreement for review within a month of issuing the letter of conditional approval. NRCan will confirm when work can begin to provide templates for reporting. As described in the contribution agreement, you will submit reports and final claims. An NRCan program officer will provide you guidance and review the reports and process the reimbursement claims. For our program, there will be 3 main templates to be shared. The first is the application guide, which is very important to go through. You can request the application guide once the program is launched. We can also share the 2 reports that will need to, there's actually 3 reports that need to be provided once you're selected as a successful applicant. The first report is usually provided within the first 6 months, and it is the gap analysis report. You provide this report to our team. Our technical review officers review the work that has been done, and then we provide reimbursements of receipts based on the work that has been done. The second report is an interim report, usually around the 12 to 18 months of the project implementation, depending on how long your project is. And the final report is, again, the interim report, but just adding some details to it. The technical review team also reviews every single report and makes sure that all the work has been done properly before issuing the reimbursements of the claims. Our ISO building success stories. So our funding program on the building side for ISO started in 2018 and will be going up to March 2026. We have successfully completed quite a few projects. One has been mentioned already, which is Bell Canada. Fantastic project, and thank you, David, for your work on that. We've also completed some projects with multiple Indigenous communities throughout Canada. We have Unisitan, Douglas First Nations, Cascadena Council, LSTC. We've also worked with a commercial building owner and manager, which is Quadreal Properties in Canada. These projects have now been completed, and the next step in the next year or so will be to develop case studies to show the success of these projects. The ISO funding projects that are currently being funded and that are not complete are with Service New Brunswick, so the government of New Brunswick, the City of Guelph, Feed Nova Scotia, which is a nonprofit organization, the City of Edmonton, CN Rail, BC Hydro as a select recipients, which means that they're redistributing some funding to their own successful clients, Shanex, which is it's a housing community for individuals that are now retired. There's the University of Toronto, Cape Breton University, and Dalhousie University. As part of our next commitment to Canadians, we are working right now to get the Ready Navigator, which is available in the US. It's a free online tool, Canadianized so that it will be available for Canadian stakeholders. 50,001 Ready Navigator tool and the 50,001 Ready recognition in Canada. So managing energy use in any facility is a team effort. To help you in the implementation process, we present the tool as a free online project management tool that guides users through all the tasks associated with the implementation of the energy management project. The guidance that the tool provides is in adherence to the 50,001 Energy Management Standard 2018 version. It consists of the 25 tasks grouped in 7 topic areas, and these tasks should be reviewed regularly to ensure that they continue to align the ISO 50000 with ISO 50001. In the Navigator tool, you and your team can note the status of each task as either non-started, the default setting, in progress, ready for review, or complete. Once the 25 tasks have been completed and designated as such in the tool, your team can self-attest as it has been fully implemented. Depending on how much experience your site has with energy management and complexity of the operation, implementing your ISO 50000 energy management system can take between 6 and 24 months. Once you have completed the 25 tasks, you can request to get the project 50001 ready recognized in Canada by NRCan. Simply complete the self-attestation form and the Energy Performance Improvement Report, which is submitted directly to NRCan via our email address, and it will be reviewed by our technical team. This process is free. As stated before, in order for you to receive the funding assistance, you do need to benchmark your energy use with Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Along with the Energy Star Portfolio Manager benchmarking, if your building is a high performance building, you can receive the Energy Star certification for your building. It's a recognition programs whose energy performance is in top quartile of their sectors. It is a voluntary program for energy managers and other key stakeholders. It is based on portfolio manager and buildings with an Energy Star score of 75 or higher. So far, in the first year, we have received approximately 177 buildings that we have certified. And over the next couple of years, we are expanding the list of building types that can be certified in Canada. We have recently added MERBs, which is multi-unit residential buildings, with a new Energy Star score that is now available. Building types are added yearly, and we are up to, I believe, is 12 building types now, 11 or 12 building types. Now, in order to be Energy Star certified, an audit needs to be conducted by a licensed professional. And this is where we have companies or consultants like Bureau Veritas who can provide that service for you. Well, that's it for my part of the presentation. If there are any questions, you can submit questions directly to our email address at Natural Resources Canada. And you can also contact our folks here that are presenting this today, and they will also work with us to provide you with the answers that you need.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you so
David.
much, Trina. That was a great presentation. I guess now we'll open it up for questions. Some of you did submit some questions prior to the webinar, but feel free to add any questions that you like into the chat.